How are you?
Jack, always great to see you. And I've got, hope you are well.
Yeah,
And again, thank you. Happy Thursday, because
happy Thursday.
Thursday. I know we're in a Thursday mode. I do have a interesting topic, and I hope something interesting to viewers, because I know we've been off for a little while and I've been a little bit lax. But let me kind of set this up. So I write, and we talked last week about a piece that I wrote, and it it might be a complicated story. So let me just say that I do use AI quite a bit to write. In fact, I wouldn't be writing if it wasn't for AI, because it really helps me with being able to clarify thoughts that I have around thing. But yet they're my thoughts, right? So I'm never, the illusion isn't needed. It's just more of like a helper, and I do like that role. And I think they are very helpful when it comes to sort of like, hey, is that a good idea? Does this seem like it? That kind of thing. I use every different service out there as well. Although I have pretty much trained ChatGPT about like my personality, so it's pretty good at like mimicking me now,
Mhm.
because I whatever. But interestingly enough, when I published a Medium in my articles. I've been really fortunate that they have been promoted by the staff of Medium, which I assume are humans. I think they're humans because they have a fairly long list of things that they look for in articles that they want to like make them compete with Substack, maybe, I guess, right? Because otherwise you're just kind of putting it out there, which is great too. I never really thought about it before, but once you get promoted, you get more attention. You actually get money, if you're doing this monetized as I am. So it's really quite a big deal to be promoted by them. So I just wrote a piece, and it's my piece about physics. I think I've hinted, my crazy physics vibe crap that I'm doing. But what I did is I tried to write it to be funny, because I think I can be funny. I don't know. And so this one I wrote myself. This is the thing. I wrote it myself in order to be funny. And what was interesting is so far, I haven't been able to tell, maybe they're slow, but they have not promoted it. So the thing is these are the articles that I usually find don't get promoted that I'm the most happy with, because I really feel like they're more of me and my personality. So it's only
Mhm.
an insane irony that the ones with AI do better. Because I guess I am a poor editor of myself, right? Isn't that true of all of us, right? Like we don't sometimes know if our work's any good. So far, setup is interesting because let me point out the actual topic, which is I also had for the very first time a student submit work that was definitely AI generated, right? Like, and it was pretty obvious, and I'm sitting there like, and it was a kind of a coding thing, and that's why I think you might have an opinion, right? And so the topic for today is like, is something that is using AI your work? And this is interesting because I don't know the answer, right? Like, because I do consider my writing my work, even though I'm aided with AI. But to be successful, I realize that my particular set of thoughts are not universal, right? Like, I don't know, you put up with me every week. Thank you, Jack. But you know what I mean? Like, you don't always communicate cleanly and well. And that, whenever you're working with other people, half of the challenge, obviously, is to see that everyone's on the same page or whatever they call it, right? Like, maybe that could be another subtopic of our authoritarianness lately, right? Like we don't want to have debate. We just want to have, a plurality or something of opinion.
Mhm.
And I guess that's so when I graded the person, I'm like, yeah, AI did a pretty good job, but that wasn't the assignment to do a good job. The assignment was to have some understanding of the mechanics behind this. So if I go in and I have AI generate a whole bunch of Python script to analyze, extraterrestrial beings or whatever, right? Or we're both fans of different authors. Like when we read an author's book, we don't necessarily expect the author's tone to be the same in each of them, right? Like they pretend and they get to play. So it's not like, I don't know, remember Tom Clancy books?
Of
You know,
course.
like, okay, well, Tom Clancy books were always like written by Tom Clancy, I guess, right? Like they had his tone was the tone making the narrative happen, right? Like he didn't
Mhm.
write a softcore pornography novel, right? You see what I mean? Like he didn't stray from his voice. So I'm curious, like if AI could write a Tom Clancy book, right? Like pretty easily, I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure, like because you could feed it the narrative and then just be like, okay, you know, topic A, take this Reddit uh post and make it into a new Tom Clancy novel. So okay, huge setup, Jack. What do you think? Anything
Mhm.
there that you're interested in talking about?
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of talking about books, right? I mean, that's an
Or
excellent
code? I'm
idea.
just saying, is this your code or is it AI's code? I don't care, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yes. So let's say, so let's transition the problem maybe into kind of a traditional setup, right? Let's say I'm reading Tolkien books and Lord of the Ring and The Hobbit and Silmarillion, right? And one of the primary themes in those books is being honorable, right? Like Aragorn
hmm,
is the knight, right? Is as honorable as possible, and pretty much everybody else is being tested, for the for at various levels, right? And the ultimate test is the ring. So let's say I read all of this. Am I on my own becoming more honorable, right? Do I have
hmm.
do I pause a little bit, or is that the author of the book who is responsible for me being maybe slightly better person, right? So
Hmm.
that's yeah. So yeah, I guess it's a difficult question, right? I mean, so if we could remove all the AI and all the you know you know rights to various artifacts, right, like text and imagery and video, and we kind of transition into that kind of, hey, I'm reading books, maybe about some beneficial or kind of socially positive uh, kind of events or behaviors. Is that the author who is responsible for me maybe getting a little bit better, or is it me who is kind of doing the actual act of reading and maybe remembering something, right?
Well, what a great twist. I mean, I guess what I think of is you're right. This is a relationship. See what I mean?
Mm,
Like if
mm,
you see something AI generated and it appeals to you,
mm.
okay. You know what I mean? Like no one's going to come in and say like, "Hold on a second," right?
Yeah,
Stop right
yeah.
there. That is not acceptable because of course our entire culture is built on crap, right? So we've we've never had that
Mhm.
much discernment moving, right? Because there's always been crap. You're watching the stupid TV again. Come on, go out and play. You see what I mean? Like we've always, right? That's been around forever, I think that we've been
Mm.
wasting our time. But like you said, it really isn't the fact that it's a terrible TV show. It's this feeling that I get because I like or familiar with or find it funny or whatever, you know what I mean? Like this is just something that has a outcome of me feeling better or maybe being energized in some way because I know from
Yeah.
your example I always adored growing up the book and the movie A Clockwork Orange, which is a somewhat reprehensible
Mm.
story, but literally about what you're saying, right? Which is the story is this a terrible person or is it just the way we experience this,
Yeah.
or is well, it literally is I think that is the topic of the book, right? Like, is this person actually bad? Or is it just the way society treats this person that makes
Mm.
them this way or something? I don't know. You might not be as big of a fan as I am, but the thing is that I really liked the energy being a teenager because you have all that energy as a teen of like not knowing what to do because you're dumb. Um, but and here it's like this really interesting energy, and I think that's true of a lot of media in general. We don't have to be media critics because we're not, but I started thinking about how someone was critiquing, I guess it was something to do with a female lead in something doing something they thought was unfeminine or whatever, like this idea of non-traditional something that they didn't like. And I kept thinking, like, well, we have a movie where this guy who's a little nobody somehow takes down an entire a group of terrorists in a building by running around in vents or something. And we're perfectly fine with that, even though it's insanely ridiculous and could never happen, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm thinking of Die Hard, right? Like, it's just
Yeah.
a fun movie, has nothing to do with how humans act. You see what I mean? But we're
Mm.
fine with that, right? We're fine with bunnies having, social anxiety over their mates in movie. You know what I mean? Like it's all made up. But what
Mm.
I mean is when it comes to your work, maybe going back, what do you think? Like, can I present my work that isn't my work, but I prompted it, I asked for it, or I don't know. That's my feeling. You said it's about how does it make me feel? And it makes me feel like, well, you just didn't do the work and are kind of
All right.
sloughing, you know?
Yeah. So let's go back, right? So let's go
Okay,
back to the same example, right? So the AI is trained on various resources, right? And then
hmm
the AI can write a book, and then
sure,
maybe we will benefit from the book, right? So let's go back to my original example, right? Ronald Tolkien was a writer, right? He was reading things, he was educated, he
sure.
had his own collection of documents that he digested and he thought about, and then he wrote this Lord of the Rings saga, right? So is he responsible for that work, or is that his work, or is that or is that maybe he's got a debt right somewhere that hey I mean
Mm.
yeah you are a great writer, definitely you created something very remarkable, but it was really I think he was in Oxford, right? I mean
Oh, sure.
so you had
Gilgamesh.
great,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, all that stuff. Yeah.
you had great teachers. I don't want to get too political here, and kind of get into the kind of the question of the society and all that stuff. But we are kind of facing the same kind of problem, right? We are looking at the AI, and the AI can be brilliant in terms
Sure.
of writing, right? And it's trained on so many different things, and maybe rightfully so, or maybe not. But then we're gonna get that output, and maybe it's going to be, maybe you're a student and you write a paper with AI
Or I
help,
write a
right?
thing myself and
All
it's not
right,
popular, but the one that's written does, see what
exactly.
I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
my own, yeah.
So it's gonna get only worse because the AI is gonna get more and more brilliant, right? There's going to be more and
Yeah.
more capabilities, maybe not exactly within the neural networks of large language models, but the ecosystem around it, the memory management, the context formulation is going to be more and more sophisticated. So the agents around the large language models will kind of maybe push the output to higher and higher level. So we are just scratching the surface today, in my opinion. But maybe 10 years from now, Lord of the Rings or Hunt for the Red of October or Clockwork Orange, it's going to be just hey, those things were boring. Look at this now. Look at this book. Everything is now, you can't put it down. Although it would be difficult for some of those novels that we kind of talk about, right? So, I mean, it Hunt for the Red October, as great as the movie was, the book, I couldn't put it down. I mean, the book, in my
Right.
opinion,
Oh
was
no, I mean
better.
that's the thing, right? It's this
Yeah,
ability to keep you engaged in something again that's, vaguely well, that
yeah.
I think, that could just also be and I think I mentioned it, or I mention it to myself a lot about stories, right? We are actually story machines. We don't really have any other way of parsing the world, right? We make up a story, and what's interesting is that because we have a weird little what do they call it? This idea that there's some sort of truth. I guess that's a thing, right? There's some sort of reality or truth, and it's like, oh no, everyone really does have their own stories, which is another kind of a story, right? Rashomon,
Mhm.
where everyone had a perspective that was different because they do, and how things affect other people is always going to have that sort of non-communal disparate way of being interpreted. And that's why it's interesting. My new class that I'm trying to build, I'm like, one of the goals is to have you guys as students bond together, because it's really us together that is going to be able to beat AI or not beat it, but you know what I mean? Like, it's going to have to be a human network. And we've been so good about kind of becoming individuals that can use computers. And I'm like, now we need to be individuals that use other individuals. Because otherwise, like you said, you can just put out a new Burgess or Nabokov book every week, but you
Yeah.
still need readers. You know what I mean? You still need to have a cultural effect on people, right? And that's, to me, the hard part. Like, how do you engage with people? And as you said, if our media is going to be so much better in 10 years, I'm going to kind of counter that. I don't think it will be, because I think they've already tried so many times, like virtual reality. We talk about that. Like, that can only go so far, right? It just literally, like, you have to get so good that you're just still gonna lose to reality, right? Like you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, reality, now maybe your reality is uninteresting, and you're gonna say, hey, this reality of uh, Call of Duty is so much more interesting, but I just think it's like, no, it's just so much more artificial, right? It's just so much more narratively driven than
Mm.
reality is. But how do you build narrative reality? You can build it with other people. You play games together, you go out and play together. You see, what all the things that I'm trying to write about now is about how we have to learn to play again,
Mm.
because that's how we actually bond as people. And subtext of that is that I'm kind of anti-sports. Sorry, sports people, because also I'm a dork and have glasses and never could play sports. But I think it's fun if you can ever remember going out with other people and making up something to do. Right? Like, that used to
Yeah.
be a thing. Like, you could make up cops and robbers or cowboys and whatever. Like, the game didn't have to have rules. You could make up the rules. And to
Yeah.
me, I think that is kind of a key thing that we may not have prioritized, because we have all these rule-based things, right? Sports, they're all rules, and people know when you're good or bad, and you get a score, and you see what I mean? Like, that is a rule-based system, which to me is no fun, right? It can be kind of just work sometimes, for especially for kids. And I also think school, I'm still in that boat. Like, I have to grade people, and I'm like, I don't really want to grade you. I just want to encourage you and try to get you to do something interesting, because I went to art school and nobody's going to be like, well, you're an A artist. Well, they do. You're an A artist and you're a B artist. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's weird, because you're like, well, okay, they're better than me, but maybe I'll stick it out longer, or maybe I have a more interesting idea that's harder to build on, or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was too much. But anything in there that you disagree with or agree with?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I mean, there's this great scene in Blade Runner where Deckard is looking for one of the Nexus Sixes, and he went to that exotic dancer place, and there was one
Mm-hmm.
of the robots is an exotic dancer, and is
Daryl Hannah.
yeah, and not the one. There was another one.
Oh, right, right. The other one
Yeah,
that is
with the
tricking him.
snake,
Yeah, yeah.
with the
Yes,
snake,
the snake woman.
and he's asking the Nexus Six, "Hey, is that a real snake?" And she says, "Well, of course not. I would never be able to afford a real snake, right?" So in that
Yeah.
world, maybe 10 or 100 years in the future, today a real snake is worth almost nothing. An artificial snake of that quality would be worth maybe billions, but then
Mm.
things reverse, right? An artificial snake would be something that they can kind of get off the shelf, but a real snake would be impossible to get. So I think everything is going to be like that pretty soon, where the AI content and the AI generated stuff and the quote unquote synthetic or artificial stuff is going to be kind of a necessary commodity, because like maybe you need to drive your car, and the only one that is available is the AI car. But the real car, like something that you and I drive today, would be a museum item, and will
Mm.
be worth millions, right? or whatever, right? So yeah, I think you are 100% right.
Well, and that would also, kind of be an interesting perspective as we're both a little bit older. So we've kind of, I believe, have lived through all of this. At least I think I have, right? Like I grew up in a time where there was television, but it was not like, you know, ubiquitous. There was only a few channels, whatever. But it was definitely different from growing up with radio, as many did, right? Like, or it was probably different growing up without radio, right? Like you'd kind of have this awareness of things in your environment that was almost all you tell each other. So I keep telling my wife, like my metaphor for the human condition is like, I hear the other village has meat, like, oh, really? Well, let's all get together and we can go over and we can get their meat. And then you go over to the other village and they're like, we don't have any meat. And then you're like, well, let's kill all of you or whatever. See what I mean? Like everything was kind of um, this supposition about something that you needed, and then you had to understand others either directly or by innuendo, right?
Yeah.
And then you just keep doing that forever, and we still do it, right? But we have so many more sources, even so now, now we get maybe too many sources, but I still think we're exactly the same. Like, do they have meat in the other village? Because I don't, I want some meat, or whatever. Like, I don't think our needs changed, even though we get more information, but you can see if that's the problem with sci-fi, right? Like our needs don't get more increasingly they're not algorithm or they're not exponential, right? If our needs became exponential, we might need fake snakes, right? Because whatever. But because our needs are still basic, we don't need fake snakes, right? We need and I don't know if this is even just being topical, but it's like I've kind of become a vegetarian for no reason. But I realize like I don't really need meat, it's fine. I don't miss it and I don't whatever. It's a personal choice, but it's the feeling that no, I've been told my entire life that every meal must have meat in it. But I'm sort of like, well, where did I get that idea? Like, right? That's not real. Or truthful, I guess. I don't think you do. I don't think I do either. But because your behavior is so for not of your own choosing, I always wonder, is the future we're going to build, because we always think it's going to be exponential, but usually it's actually disruptive. Something happens that you had no idea that could ever happen, like AI, right? Like no idea. I watched Hinton the other day. That guy is still clueless. Because you know what? He just doesn't like the idea that this was a rational system that became an irrational system, right? Like we built this rational system because we are smarter than hell, right? And we are. That we managed to make computers do this hoop, but that rational system is flawed without the irrationality part. And they never saw it coming, and they still don't like it, kind of. So they like to do like, you won't, AI will take over, watch this video. It'll, doom and gloom stuff. Whereas you and I think, are still cool with this idea because we're like, yeah, that's the fun of this. It's like, who knew that, it wasn't going to be, okay, if we can only get one more clock cycle out of this, it's gonna finally work, right? Because that's like an engineering problem. Whereas the other thing isn't an engineering problem, it's a perception problem. Hey, is this any good? Remember GPT-3? I mean, it was good, but it was rough. You know what I mean? Like it was weird, because you're like, wow, you're so weird. Like, how did you get this from this, right? Like, how did, it's like it didn't, the even now, the back and forth, it's just so good, but it just like this weird thing of like, what, how did you get that thing from what I just prompted you with, right? And how did I just loved it. I always thought it was really cool, like that just was so unexpected. Whereas a rational thing would be like, no, it's 12. The answer is 12. And remember, it couldn't do those. It was like, I don't know what words are. I don't know what numbers mean. You know what it was anyway. Sorry, I'm rambling. Any of that rambling help?
Well, I mean, coming back maybe to your original kind of idea for a discussion, right? Like, okay, so here's a piece of an artifact that got generated, right? Maybe it's an image, maybe it's text, maybe something,
Yeah.
right? So, so then, I think the real, one of the aspects of our kind of like discussion is, okay, so what about the quality of it, right? Like, is it great? I love it, right? But is it really kind of like, maybe I love it because I'm surprised by, this is grammatical sentences that this thing gives me, and maybe it's a little funny, right? And maybe it's a little similar to what you are typically writing, right? So it kind of grabs some natural language processing capabilities, right? So that's one aspect, right? But the quality, is such a deep topic, right? I mean, maybe the ultimate quality will be the something that will transpire in academic research, right? Or in research in general, right? Like, okay, so you kind of gave the AI a question, and the AI will give you back like an invention, right? Like, hey, I need a new material, and the AI is going to tell you, hey, here's the recipe for trilithium, right? And you can just build Star Trek, spaceships from it, or power it until and fly to the end of the universe, something like that, right? So that would be an invention, that is something that is new, that kind of put together from the existing knowledge, extrapolated into a useful direction, and there you go. You have something new, right? Like a new material or a new pharmaceutical, like a kind of new chemical compound or whatever, right? So that would be that. I believe that we are very close to that happening. I mean, a lot of people are betting on it, right? So yeah, so the quality, right, is kind of difficult, especially given the quote from Michael Scott, in The Office, right? Like, we know that the AI is all trained on the internet data, right? And Michael Scott very had a very astute observation, like that he loves the internet because the information on the internet that can read is based on everybody can read anything they want, on the internet, and that's why this is the best information. So given that quality of the input, we are expecting a lot from the AI, right? We are expecting a lot, and I think we are getting a lot. So,
Well,
yeah, I'm
I'm
very
gonna push
optimistic.
back. No, I'm gonna push back because actually this is part of my
Uh-huh.
analysis for my class, which is I guess I call it. Well, the concept is you need a container, right? This is the kind of the design idea, is that you need some sort of a container, and the container has some set it up rules, but the container itself is okay because the computer can deal with it. And we'll call it a data model, or we'll call it whatever. But there's a data model, and you and I were both around, right, when wikis came out. And I always thought wikis were just really cool because, like, oh, the idea of editing and the idea of reading became intertwined, right? There wasn't sort of the master panel idea like I have in WordPress or whatever. Like, there wasn't this sort of command and control. And because we're both coders, that's the idea, is like underneath this, there's a million lines of code, and we go in and we adjust these things, and we're very, we have a different mindset. And the output of this is going to be your check gets cashed, whatever, right? Like, these are these things where you're like, hey, the container of Swift, which is what makes banking run, I guess, right, is really old, and it still works apparently. Crazy. But I know POTS, the telephone system doesn't really work. It's almost all antiquated now, but it still has to work because of its legacy, right? Like, we
Yeah,
have to have phone numbers, but we don't. So that maybe is, I think, where, I'm not a strict futurist, because there's no reason that we have a lot of these things, right? Only because they work, which is great. And people, they're reliable, right? So that's another thing, that people are just pretty much, hey, it's fine. God, when we were young, don't you remember the cars? We used to break all the freaking time. Like, they were not very good. you know, because they were all kind of made by hand, and they were probably, people had bad days, and, you know, sometimes the pour didn't go right or whatever, right? But now, you know, we kind of got rid of all them. So now we have really reliable cars that are almost manufactured completely by, I guess, robots or something, or, you know, whatever, more reliable processes. So that when they do go wrong, it's a design flaw. And maybe that's the point. Maybe instead of being car engine builders, where I'm like, hey, let me take a look at the car engine you built. I think this is where you're going, right? Like, you didn't build this car engine. You know, you might be responsible for this car engine or whatever, or putting it in the right place in the car, but we know this is a collective, right? Everything is sort of a collective. And the reason I brought this up was Wikipedia, because it, in a sense, you know, kind of proved the point that more people working on something with the right container makes for a better thing, right? Rather than having fewer Tom Clancy's write in the entire Wikipedia, which used to be the case, right? You'd have really, really, really special people do this. And now it's like, no, everyone does this. And because everyone does it, you get kind of this higher rate, even though it's never perfect, right? You can only get so good. But it is what you're thinking. What do you think? Are we on crossing our lines here? But I wonder, like, I don't think we need better than 80%. You know what I mean? That's our thing, is we don't need artificial snakes in a way, right? Because we don't, you know, we'll just reprioritize, you know, when things are bountiful, we take advantage of them, right? When they become scarce, we adjust as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, except for the cars, I think that we peaked
Cars
with the
were better
cars
back then.
in 2005. Now we are kind of sliding down into really planned obsolescence. That, you know, all those screens and all this automation
Oh,
in cars, you know,
that is true. That is true.
it's going to be terrible. You know, the car, you know, basically, if you are not leasing a car, then you are risking it, because, you know, maintenance of a 5-year-old car is going to be just a nightmare if you buy a new car today. But, you know, if you have like a 2010, you
I
know,
do. I have a
Honda.
2008 car, so I'm
Exactly. Yeah. So you are justified. Yeah. So yeah. So you are right. I mean, your car that you currently have, or, you know, I have a similar kind of old car.
yeah.
Those cars will outlast, you know, everything new that is being produced today. So that's my opinion. Maybe not in Illinois, because we are, you know, because of the salt on the road and the rust, right? But generally speaking, right? So yeah, I agree with you that, you know, in many environments that, you know, let's say the sci-fi authors create, you know, those worlds, usually, you know, like going back to Blade Runner, you know, Philip K. Dick did not create, you know, like an apartment for the Blade Runner that had like a levitating beds, you know, and you know, I don't know, something that is kind of like you know, kind of like, I don't know, maybe materializing or teleporting dishes in the kitchen. It was a regular kitchen, and there was a regular sofa, and there was a regular bed, and he was drinking from a regular glass, you know, and getting drunk and
Right.
stuff like that, right? So you are right. I mean, in some areas, maybe we need fusion, right? Maybe, you know, there's not enough, you know, sunlight, you know, and there's not enough wind, you know, and certainly we don't want to burn stuff, you know, in power plants. So maybe we need fusion, right? So maybe we need to be super sophisticated in some areas, but the everyday life, yeah, I don't need a snake that is automatically created. I don't need a Nexus 6 that is gonna wash my dishes. I don't need anything like that, right? So yeah, I agree. I agree with you. But in terms of writing, right? I mean, that might be a little bit of a different domain, because language is basically a platform for intelligence, right? I mean, and AI people have been researching this for decades now, right? Like
Yeah, they
the
really
fact,
love that word too. I know, it's
yeah,
funny.
yeah, the fact that, you know, that human language is such a nuanced thing, it's so allegorical, and it's so you know, the bandwidth is so deep, you know, in human language, then perhaps there is something to be said about, you know, AI becoming better in writing, right, or creating again, I'm not speaking about, like visual kind of like maybe artifacts, like the new Star Wars, for example, was not a better movie, even though it had like a million times more spaceships. The original Star Wars was better because the story was better, and the starships, were great, but you don't need 100,000 of them, right? On screen, right? So the same thing may be true with writing, right? You don't need to be like a 10 times more amplified Tom Clancy, right? Maybe you need to be at the Tom Clancy level, right? But maybe you just need to create a different story. Maybe you kind of create different twists. So I would say, maybe yes or no, on this in this kind of discussion.
Well, the story that I wrote where I was trying to be funny, of course, was about physics, and one of my fascinations with physics is about extremes, right? Because if extremes existed, they would happen basically, and if they happen, they would be catastrophic, right? If you had nulls, nulls would be everywhere, and you can't have nothings, right? That's one rule, right? Like you just can't have nothing. And the same thing is true of infinities, right? You just can't have infinities. Then they would just be everywhere. They would take over everything. I mean, I'm talking about cosmologically, right? And I think the same thing is true, is that we love to imagine these infinities, right? We love to imagine that if a car did this, 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 and this, had air-conditioned seats, had let us watch TV, and all the things, that in a time when you used to have CRTs that would weigh like 500 pounds, we're like, oh wow, you could just put a TV everywhere. It didn't change anything. That's what's so weird, right? It didn't change anything really about TV, right? It was still a thing that was in your periphery, and it still was, vaguely annoying a lot of the time, right? And the user interfaces, what I tend to spend my life on, right, are still complicated, because you can't just cram more in. Topic of this week, right? Like people just, we still think in threes and fives, and I'm doing that in my new class. I'm like, well, we need three things because people can't think about five things, right? Like that's just we have a bandwidth. We don't like these infinities. And I think you made a great point about cars, right? Is that the more sci-fi you try to get, one of those things will fail, and the whole experience gets so much worse, right? It's like it all kind of just can't reach this point. It just really can't. And the more they try, it is funny because you're like, well, let's give them 10 years. And I think that's funny, right? Because I'm like, well, like you said, 10 years didn't make any big difference from your and my car to now, and that's why I couldn't care less, right? I do have a phone now, which wasn't really a thing back when my car was built, that they had to figure out how to deal with phones. But that's like if you go into an Uber now, they always seem to have like 6 phones and something going. I'm like, you are in Blade Runner territory. I guess if you did this all day long, right, that you'd need many devices, which I think is even worse, kind of. But that is Blade Runner-y, right? Like technology just makes people more and more specialized in their usage. Whereas back when Michael Scott and them, they just wasted time on the internet, and now we have to like live on it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another message that you also often make, right? I mean, Michael Scott was wasting enormous amount of time, and everybody in the office was wasting an enormous amount of time. But they were still the best office, the best selling office, because they had a relationship with the customers. Michael Scott knew exactly who their biggest customers were, what the names of the children of the CEOs were, where do they have birthdays, what do they, what kind of, dietary preferences they had, right? So he was a great boss, and he it was obviously a caricature, but still, right? I mean, had such an immense qualities, right? And maybe so was he productive, right? In the AI world, right? He would be fired, right? If the AI agent.
Well, John McClane did save the world. I mean, remember, these are narratives.
Yeah. So So yeah, so there's something. Yeah, I think that. Yeah,
Well,
I'm not
that's
not sure.
the next piece I'm going to write, which I think you
Mhm.
kind of teed up a little. I want to write it. It's about emotional support, right? Like the thing is that actually we overemphasize productivity as being some sort of measured thing, or intelligence as a measure, whatever, and um, all these things. But it's actually emotional state, I think, is more important, right? Because you just said it in these narratives. If you can just connect with someone emotionally, then things get done. And
Mhm.
if you're not, which kind of is the joke of The Office, right? Is everyone's sort of terrorized by Michael Scott, but they toned him down enough that, and no one gets fired, right? Like this is
Mhm.
the thing. Like there are no repercussions, unlike real life,
Mhm.
from your actions. But in that narrative trope, you're still, like you said, connecting emotionally is what they had to double down on, because if people watching the show don't connect emotionally, they find it boring. Just like
Mhm.
when you're reading your Neil Stevenson book, or I'm trying to read Frankenstein, and it's interesting like how narratively, I don't know if you read Frankenstein, but it starts out about the story of this guy, and he's writing to his friend, and then he meets another guy, and then it's the story of this other guy. It's like, wow, back then they really needed a lot of setup, I guess, narratively, and
Mhm.
then he meets someone, and anyway, this idea of like how do you get emotionally engaged in it with a character is changed over time,
Mhm.
and shorthand is that I think you can still connect to, who is it, Pequod or Ahab or whatever, right? But it's not written from Ahab's point of view. It's written from Ishmael's point of view, right? And that's who you're supposed to connect with, even
Mhm.
though they're weird, right? Like we're always, the other is how we see the world sometimes. And by
Mhm.
connecting emotionally with the other, then we trust what the other has to say. But
Yeah.
if we just are going by what they say, AI, like it's very hard, I think, to get emotionally engaged in AI. I know people talk about it, but I'm like, dudes, it's a fucking anime character that says what you want to hear. Like it's not that interesting, right? I'm sure it's okay, but sorry, I don't know. I'm not buying it, right?
Well, yeah. Again, right? I mean, the description that you made of the novel, right? Like, okay, so you build a relationship, you spend enough time to kind of develop those. You could think about this as a, okay, so there's recipes for building novels, right? I mean, you
Oh,
have authors,
100%.
right? So
The
that
quest, yeah,
recipe,
whatever,
yeah,
the failing, the quest, everything is,
exactly,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's
So
how
the
you connect emotionally, though, is what I meant. Like if
exactly,
you
right. So
didn't,
there's,
yeah.
yeah, so there's a metadata, right, for a novel like Frankenstein, and then for a novel like Sherlock Holmes, you just fill in the blanks, right? So
I can
uh,
remember attaching emotionally to these devices, right? Remember when that was a
exactly,
thing? Like because we hold them, and they are
yeah,
these things, and I still have whatever 20-year-old freaking iPad, because you kind of have this like object, but with words and
yeah,
things, I think it's
yeah, yeah,
it's harder.
yeah. So now AI has the same recipes, right? AI has the same algorithmic capability to look at those, right? So if AI applies the same recipe and will come up with probabilistic outcome that reads great, right? Is it necessarily lesser than than maybe Conan Doyle, right? Or or Neil Stevenson, right? I mean, it's something to kind of think about. I'm not sure.
As we have, by the way.
Yeah.
What a delightful discussion, because I think we both can agree, right? It's there's the infinities that we will
Mm.
avoid, right? Because that's the thing, is we're gonna curve, and maybe my feeling is that AI as it is now is probably as good as it's ever gonna get, right? Like I think you can go multimodal to some extent, right? But still, like it's how do we use it, right? It's how people engage with it is interesting. And that's where in my youth I remember this show where these freaking time travelers, I guess they were, or they went somewhere somehow, but I remember they had these little earpieces, And in the earpieces, there was this group of people with the bad computer thing. And they were just like, Jim, that's general. It's kind of like, it was a crappy version of Mission Impossible, right? But what I remember is the whole trope was that they would tell them things that they wouldn't normally know because they were idiots. Actually, the people, they were like soldiers that went on these jobs and they didn't have any skills or training or understanding of anything. And so these smart people who didn't want to be in danger would just tell them things through their magical ability to see whatever was going on. I think it was called I don't remember what it was. Probably not ringing a bell, but that thought is always what I think of. Like, when you have AI glasses, right? Is AI glass going to be like, hey, I can look at this image of somebody and I'm going to tell you because you're too dumb to remember their name. And then you're going to be a successful politician now because you can pull the I know your name trick. And then you pull out the, it's like the trope, right? That are you the person that remembers these things? Or are you Neil Stevenson that has a vision for a story, right? That may or may not connect with people? Or can you be like Clancy, that you've got this character, Michael Scott, right, who's this sort of flawed yet adventurous, bookwormy, whatever, the proxy for the male ego that we can identify and connect with emotionally. So when things happen to them, we're sort of invested, right? Like, oh my God, your daughter's going to be kidnapped and you've got to run over. And anyway, whatever people do in books that keep us engaged. And I'm just keep wondering, if you brought that into the real world, is that like our end game, that we would that's what we want, is to not have to remember somebody's kids' names? I think it's my thing because I can never remember freaking names. I'm just so terrible at it.
Yeah, well, I
except
think
for yours, Jack. I know you're Jack.
I think I have to disagree with you on the AI. I mean, there's on the quality, right? So I think there was this podcast with Andrew Karpathy from one of the founders of OpenAI, and it's breaking the internet because he basically said that today AI agents are kind of crappy, right? So that's kind of basically what he said, right? But what he really meant is that, hey, those agents, they don't really have good memory solutions, right?
Oh, right, right. The context window could get broader. You're right. I mean, if you had a infinite context window, but isn't that?
But then he
pick up a lot of room.
He assumed that everything has to be in the box, right? Like the chat GPT, right, is kind of like everything, right? But if you say, hey, so how about we have another AI that is managing the memory? Oh, yeah, so that is going to be a much better solution. Or how about we have another AI that is going to be multimodal? Oh, of course, that will improve the agent, right? So what Karpathy said was kind of like, okay, in the narrow architecture, the AI is kind of very far from being perfect, right? And
but I think it's still great. I'm just saying, I think it's still great. I'm not saying, I just think we don't know personally as humans how to take advantage of it, right? Like, how long did it take for us all to get laptops? 20 years? What's the difference? Oh, it just meant that, okay, computers are not like monolithic things that you have to sit at a desk to be in front of. And there isn't anything particularly that you have to be, chained to an actual room full of things, right? But that took a long time. And did it change anything? Well, not really, right? I mean, it's still kind of the same. We just are kind of less tied to infrastructure than we used to. And phones, of course, right? Like, hey, can I get something done on my phone? And somebody said, well, why not? And then we worked on that for 10 years, right? And they're like, okay, for the most part, you could probably get it done on a phone. So you see what I mean? It really took people the time, and then the technology just sort of form fit, rather than the technology at all being bad. In fact, no, I think models like 5.0 or whatever outstanding, right? I mean, they're really amazing. But if I was going to run a bank, right, would I want GPT-5 running it, or would I want, like you said, probably a more architecturally and that's why I think, what was it, DSPY? that has to be the way, right? Because you have to have some transparency to a human to assess, right? At each point, like, hey, are you doing a good job? What does a good job even mean? Oh, wow, AWS goes out, which funny, we didn't talk about that, but you see what I mean? Like, apparently they hired a lot of AI people. This is the narrative, right? And that's why AWS went out, right? That somehow humans were able to deal with a problem that AI couldn't handle. Which has got to be the topic of our next conversation. It's like, what do you want AI to take over in our lives? And I think you can definitely handle this discussion because you have a lot more imagination than I do. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you can kind of keep up,
We'll
really well.
always make it work, Jack. That's all. Anyway, cheers, my friend. Thank you for the wonderful chat, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. You too.